Well, good morning, everybody. This is the Better Leader Inner Circle February edition, the day after Valentine's Day. And I hope everybody either had the romantic adventure that they hoped they would have, or that at best it was just a nice quiet evening at home if you're by yourself. We are already here in Calgary, Alberta, ready to broadcast to the world, the Better Leader Inner Circle. We have 72 people registered, which is an exciting milestone, over 70 for us today. And the dogs have both been given bones, and the do not ring the doorbell sign has been posted well on the front door so people don't interrupt us, mostly not because of the doorbell, but because of the howling of two useless dogs who just bark and don't do anything practical for anybody except hang around and keep your feet warm on a winter's night. My name is Steve Armstrong, and I'm with StephenArmstrong.ca. You may know me as a speaker, a coach, an organizational consultant, and the Better Leader Inner Circle has been going on for just short of a year now. And we've had a monthly session with a range of people from across North America for the most part, but we do have recordings that are issued at the end of each session that my YouTube analytics say that they are being watched around the world. So wherever you're tuning in from whatever time zone and whatever part of the planet you are on right now, I wish you well, and I'm glad you're with me today. At the end of the last session, one of our regular members of the Inner Circle asked a great question. How do you lead people where you are being led? And I think it's such an interesting question. It truly it is. And I think we want to explore that. Like, what does that mean? One of the things that we've spoken a lot about is the point of the first team concept with you, your peers, and your boss. But how do you align yourself and your people that work for you with the organization in a better way? And I'd like to, of course, start with a story because that's what I'm all about, good stories. And I titled this story, What the Hell Does That Actually Mean? What on earth does that mean? And I'm speaking now about lofty visions and lofty mission statements and exciting things that get people in head office and corporate headquarters and boards and CEOs and C-suite executives super excited, but mean nothing to anybody in the organization. So really, what does that mean? Well, let's take this apart. I used to work for two very large organizations, the Canadian Armed Forces. As most of you know, I was a soldier for many years. And I also worked for the Canadian Red Cross, doing humanitarian work after my military career. I did that for about 13 years, I guess. And both very high-minded, very lofty, thoughtful organizations with high-minded, high-valued mission statements. And so when I say, what does that mean? It meant nothing. I was a senior guy. I was a sergeant major in the Army, and I was now they call them vice presidents, but I ran a provincial leg of the organization for Red Cross here in Alberta in the Northwest Territories. And from our American viewers, it would be the equivalent to a state organization. And had this tremendous vision to improve the lives of vulnerable people by mobilizing the power of humanity in Canada and around the world. What a powerful, high-valued, high-minded statement. But it meant nothing to most people. What does that mean? Like, where do I fit into that? And yeah, okay, well, we're here to improve the lives of vulnerable people, but what does that mean? Do we give them all houses? Do we protect them in times of disaster and conflict? Do we keep them safe? And what does mobilizing the power of humanity? A lot of people look at an organization like Red Cross and many others in that business as a fundraising machine. And so do we just funnel money around the world, or do we actually do really good work? Do we respond in the emergency and make sure people are safe? Or do we do preventative work up front? Or do we do long-term recovery work after? All of these things could fit into, you could drive a train load, like a gigantic train load of statements through that apply to that statement. As thoughtful as it is, it means nothing to somebody on the front lines of the organization trying to figure out just what the heck their job is when it comes to that. And to complicate it even more, one of the goals was said to that our goal of the organization is to give people the skills and knowledge to make safe choices, prevent injury, and respond in emergency situations. Again, it means nothing to a frontline person. How does that factor into my job? What am I supposed to do with that? Well, let's take this apart a little bit and think a little bit more about what that meant. So believe it or not, what this statement, the people have skills and knowledge to make safe choices, prevent injury, principally applied, not exclusively, but principally applied to first aid training and also swimming lessons and a couple of our ancillary education programs. But principally it was a first aid statement. Like we knew from research that somebody who had a standard first aid course had a significantly reduced risk of ending up in an emergency ward at some point. And it applied to like babysitting and, all these sort of things that are very useful and practical. But it doesn't even say that in that document. What the heck does that mean? And at the time, it's been a few years, of course, but at the time, Red Cross was a significant delivery agent for first aid training across Canada. There's others, so very honorable organizations like St. John Ambulance and the Life Saving Society and others that delivered first aid training. But Red Cross was principally one of the largest, probably on par with St. John Ambulance. And in that first aid training, as a statement to Bent, the only really way we could deliver on this particular goal was to increase the number of people that were getting training. And nobody at our head office was providing us any clear guidance on defining this or articulating this particular statement in a way that was much more useful to our employees and our volunteers and our training delivery partners to help them figure out what to do with this. So as a leadership team for Western Canada, we sat in our little high office at our penthouse boardroom meeting. It's not much of a penthouse, it was just a room on the top of our building and the 5th floor. And we sat in there at our training center, and we used it as a boardroom. And we sat in there trying to define this. And in absence of anybody actually giving us any help or assistance in figuring this thing out, we on our own decided, well, how we already have deliver a significant amount of first aid training, but what could we do more to meet this goal? And as an organization, we thought, well, what if we could we double the number of people who receive training? What would that look like? And this is where, as leaders, we had to stop, because we did not want to be the people to issue an edict that we would double first aid training. That was impossible that could have well been impossible for our employees and volunteers and staff to deliver on. So we stopped and we brought in some of the people that led the first aid marketing and first aid training program. And we had this conversation around, could this happen? Could we double our sales? And the answer came back, yes, absolutely. That's a stretch goal, but we could probably do that. And then by making that statement, by saying that within 5 years, I think was the ultimate statement, that in Western Canada, we would double our first aid sales which meant double the number of people who received first aid training, because sales and training to people reached are two different things. We could double our sales by doubling our price, but that wasn't our goal here. So we could double the number of people reached. And the most interesting thing happened next. The most interesting thing happened next was we started to get our employees super engaged in this thing. And we were able to allocate different resources around Western Canada, from Manitoba to British Columbia and the North, the high Arctic, to allow us to do that. And one of the things that we realized was we had to crack open the market in British Columbia, which was at that time pretty well controlled by the provincial government. And we knew that if we could open up that market, we could actually double our sales, because we had a product that was good and it was accepted, but it was challenging to get people to buy into the program because of the provincial government. So one of the things we were able to do was reallocate government resources people to allow us to position our first aid program in British Columbia. And then we were able to increase the staff support in British Columbia to build up the capacity, because one thing about getting what you hope for was, do you have the capacity to deliver what you're offering? And that allowed us then to position ourselves. Now, we had some good luck along the way. It wasn't entirely all of just us doing it. The luck came when the government was in financial straits and decided to get out of that business and open up the market. And because they opened up the market and we were prepared, we actually were able to hit that goal of doubling first aid sales within 3 years, not the 5 years. So we have some people joining us, and Denise, I see you coming in. And we're just doing our orientation here, Denise. So thank you for joining us. I was just explaining the story about. Oh, there you are. And I was just explaining the story about how we doubled our first aid sales, but I'm not going to bore everybody by repeating it again. So we'll just carry on. But one of the things that we were allowed us to do then, of course, by clearly articulating a goal, and for Denise, I'll just go back over a slide here for you, that we were able to double our sales. It's just coming here. Yeah, there we go. And we were able to double our sales here by increasing our first aid sales in British Columbia, because we had this bogus, wordy, kind of high-minded statement around increasing knowledge and skills around safe choice and preventing injuries with our organization, the Red Cross at the time. And it was so high-minded, it didn't mean anything to anybody. And we were able to, as leadership team and in support of some of the people that we're working with, we were able to articulate that into a statement that said we would double our first aid, not double our sales, because that could easily be met by doubling our price, but we were able to double our reach and then by being clear about that, we were able to reallocate resources around to allow that to happen. So, but how do we do that? How do we align organization and employee goals? And, as a story I just told everybody about was, we often have these very lofty things that dribble down through the organization, and they become useless platitudes and statements to somebody in the front lines, or even, as I explained in the story around the first aid sales, like I didn't even know what the heck that meant. And I was a senior vice president. I was like 3 steps below the CEO, and I still didn't quite understand what people wanted us to do until we took that statement and articulated it clearly. One of the things we need to understand is that the measure of a great team is whether we actually get anything done. And there's you may have heard me speak to this about what is leadership in past, but quite frankly, if you're not accomplishing your goals and objectives, I don't know what you're leading. I don't know what you're doing. I think you're, quite frankly, you're probably running a country club and keeping everybody happy and comfortable, but you're not achieving your goals. And I come from organizations that if you didn't achieve your goals, somebody got hurt or killed or worse. So, I know it's not always that dire of a situation for most organizations, but we need to accomplish this. And we need to be able to set out clearly in our organization what we want to accomplish. And Patrick Lencioni, who is, as some of you know, I am a licensee of Patrick Lencioni in the Table Group. But one of the things he talks about are what are the 3 signs of a miserable job? And one is anonymity. And that doesn't necessarily mean nobody knows your name, but what it means is we aren't understood and appreciated for our unique contribution. The other one is irrelevance, that we don't see how our work impacts the lives of others. And the last one is immeasurability. And that means by that, we don't get a daily sense of accomplishment. So if you set lofty, high-minded goals that are not clearly defined and not articulate in a way that your employees can get behind them and understand where they fit in, you check off all 3 of those boxes of anonymity, irrelevance, and immeasurability. And quite frankly, what you turn your employees into having is miserable jobs. And your turnover goes up if people aren't happy in their role. If people are not recognized for participating or doing good work and feeling that they're part of something bigger, they often either wander off or get demotivated and quit or leave the organization, and your turnover goes up. So, these are quite serious challenges to us as leaders. And we need to understand that if we understand the unique contribution of our employees, that our employees are putting in that, and how that work impacts others, and have a sense of accomplishment, wouldn't that make a huge difference in our organizations as leaders? I can't help but think that it wouldn't do nothing but. And so another Red Cross story, one of the programs we ran in Red Cross was a program called the Medical Equipment Loan Program. And we would lend out free of charge to people mobility and bathing and aids for them to be convalesce or even hospice setting where they could be palliative at home, and we would lend this stuff out. And quite frankly, the employees and the volunteers that worked in that organization were some of the lowest paid people that worked for us, and they had quite terrible. Like sometimes they had a terrible job. They were dealing with people who were at their worst and lowest point in their lives, our customers and clients. And unfortunately, when they would get stuff back, they were often left to sanitize, clean, and maintain toiletry items, things that sometimes had poop on them and other things. It was just not very nice work. But where I spent a lot of time was with those folks that were working in there. And I explained to them how important their work was, that if they were providing dignity and safety and comfort to people at their worst, and their work was super impactful to our clients and residents. And every time they touched a piece of equipment that made it safe or clean, they improved somebody's life. And if they treated somebody who was in dire straits coming out of the hospital or worse, going into palliative care, that they had treated that person with a little bit of dignity, that then that person could hold their head up a little bit more. And they got a daily sense of accomplishment from that work. And as an aside, we would always offer people the opportunity to donate a financial gift if at the end of their term of using the equipment. And once we started motivating our employees in this program, and they understood what their contribution was and how it impacted people and their sense of accomplishment, actually their positive response to an ask for donation went through the roof. They were, in effect, some of our best fundraising people, because they would get about a 60 to 70% donation rate every time somebody asked. And even if somebody didn't have any money, sometimes they would come and they would volunteer with us and do other work. And so the cause and effect of connecting people with the lofty goals of the organization was immeasurable and impactful right away. So how do we align? Like, most of our goals and our objectives are these 50,000-foot level things. And at best, some of our organizations set these goals, take those, and then they lower them down to about 10,000 feet at a departmental or business unit level. But we never get to sea level. We never connect the dots to the people on the front lines. How can we get these people to work? Well, if you imagine back in the early 60s, President Kennedy was looking at the risk of the Soviet arms race. The arms race was happening, and they were looking at a moon race to get people to the moon first, to expand on that. And one of the things that he set out for his people was that the goal was to land a man on the moon, and in those days they were all men, but land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth by the end of this decade. So for such a large, complicated, huge, ambitious goal, what a simple statement. And one of the things that I like about what was said there was it had an action. It had a goal. We're going to get a man on the moon. And the qualifier, the measure of success, we would return that person safely to Earth. And it was time bound by the end of the decade. And the decade in this case was the 1960s. And of course, man walked on the moon in 1969. And those people were returned safely to Earth on that operation. But this goal was then articulated throughout NASA, all the way through the food chain. Everybody understood what this goal was, and everybody knew that they had a role to play. And in a follow-up story to this, you may know the story, is that at a different time, President Kennedy was at NASA in Houston, and he saw a janitor that was sweeping the floors in one of the lab areas. And he says, "Oh, what's your name?" And the guy told him his name. And he says, "What do you do here at NASA?" And the man said, "Sir, I am helping to put a man on the moon." So how powerful was that? That everybody in the organization, right down to the janitor, knew their role was to hit this target and to do this. So some of you may know well the SMART goals. We'll speak to that, but why bother? Because people need to understand, right? And so SMART are setting goals that are specific. This is what we're doing. It's measurable. It's attainable. It's relevant. In this case, attainable and relevant to the employee we're speaking about. So how do we articulate putting a man on the moon? Or how do we articulate doubling first aid sales, or whatever it may be, in a way that's specific to that employee, so that they're connected to that, so that you end up at the end of the day, you have a janitor cleaning the floors in a building that understands that their role is to help put a man on the moon by keeping things clean and tidy and hitting a certain standard for the cleanliness of it. And it's attainable because we give the person both the resources and the training and education to get the job done. It's extraordinarily relevant. And then, in fact, it's time bound too. Denise, if you have something to ask or say, please jump in. It's a small group. You're good? Thank you. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things we have to do is engage our employees in getting this done. So in my example earlier about doubling first aid sales, we as senior leaders in the organization could have said our goal is to double first aid reach and training and numbers, and we're going to do it in 5 years. And as soon as we would have said that out loud and said it to our employees, you know what would have happened? There would have been a small riot. People probably would have agreed and smiled and nodded their heads at us. But as soon as they would have walked away, they said, "What a bunch of disconnected nincompoops." Somebody put this goal in this. So we offered it as a suggestion. We said, "Could we do this? This is what we'd like to do. What do you think?" And our employees, and particularly the employees involved with a first aid training program at the time, um, gave input. So they said, "Yeah, we could do that. And we think we could do that in 5 years." And then we allowed them to answer the questions. How did we get creative and get open to new ideas? And we invested time by sitting with these people and working side by side, and always can have opening lines of communication with them to be able to get them to work. So the employees put the input on the goals. Yes, we could do it in 5 years. We believe that. But to do that in 5 years, we have to invest in extra resources, mostly human, in specific skill sets. At the time, it was government relations, so we could work with the provincial government in British Columbia at the time to be able to change the regulations and to get our first aid training in throughout the system. We had to be creative and open to new ideas to how to make sure we had the capacity that if this were to happen, we had the capacity to deliver. And we focused and we didn't walk away from that. We had regular, if probably bi-weekly, meetings and conversations at the beginning with the project leads on this. So they understood that we were with them and behind them, and we weren't going to leave them out there to swing. Because often that's what happens, right? Somebody sets a high, lofty goal and walks into a room and says, "Here's your job, ladies and gentlemen, get to work." And then they disappear. And then 3 or 4 months later, or a year later, they come back and say, "Why the hell didn't you hit your goal? And why is this a failure?" And then somebody's either disappointed or discouraged or disgruntled, or worse, dismissed and thrown down, just thrown into the trash heap because they didn't hit this goal. If it's important, we need to be able to articulate it clearly. So our goal was double reach, like increase the number of people that receive first aid training by doubling that number. It was time bound because we had a conversation with our employees that we felt comfortable we could do this within 5 years. And then we invested with these people. It was attainable because we were able to apply more resources to the problem to help it get sorted out. And time bound. And then it was the overarching part of this was that we invested into our people, that we were able with them, and we were trying to get through them. One of the other things, a great story about around goals and objectives in the National Health Service, which is the British National Public Health Program. What they did, they said somebody at a high level announced one day that one of their goals was that if you checked into, they call it A&D, accident and admitting, E&A, I think emergency admitting, it's basically the emergency ward, entry into the hospital. If you went into the emergency room ward of the hospital, that you would have been in a bed within 24 hours. And they just announced it, and it was put in place as a key performance indicator for the health system, and people's jobs were on the line, and this was a goal that they had to meet. Well, not surprisingly, almost all hospitals within 6 months or a year of that announcement were still failing. It was taking 48 to 72 hours to get somebody into a bed. But there was one outlier in the statistics around this, and there was this one hospital that was killing it. They were hitting their target beyond words. Within a few months, they were having people in a bed within 24 hours. And they couldn't figure this out. So finally, somebody from world headquarters at the National Health Service went down to this particular hospital to try to understand why this one facility was being so exceptionally good in hitting their targets. And what they found was somebody, some smart guy or girl in the organization, understood that if a gurney had wheels, it was a gurney, but if it didn't have wheels, by definition, it was a bed. And this hospital was just taking the wheels off of gurneys and beds so that it was fixed to the floor, and they marked it as, yeah, no problem. This person, we hit the goals because all of our patients were in beds within 24 hours. So what part of the SMART goals sort of definition did we cover off there? Well, somebody was smart enough to figure out how to bend the rules enough to get it done. But because it was unattainable, and because it was unrealistic, and because it wasn't, it was measurable, and that was the only thing that really mattered, people managed around this whole thing and solved the problem in a completely inappropriate way. People were still in hallways. They were just on something without a bed. So the next slide is a little messy, but you can see here, this is a city that I did a project for, and you can see the 8 goals. So improve quality customer service. If you look at the grayed out ones, reduce waste and loss to the department to save money, secure approval for a new computer system, promote a more positive work environment. These were employee goals. So the ones that I read off, numbers 1, 6, 7, and 8, are not SMART. And why? Because they're not specific. Improve quality customer service. What does that mean? Reduce waste and loss to save money. That means nothing to anybody. They're not measurable. They're not even achievable because they're ill-defined and unclear. Like for example, the number 7 goal, it relies on a city council to do something. Well, that is not attainable for an individual. How can you be held to account for a decision that's probably 14 layers up the food chain from your position to do something that allows that to happen? Are they realistic? Potentially, but none of this means anything, and they're not time bound at all. But if you look at the other ones, the 2 to 5, you can see that they're better goals, right? They reduce monthly average of product loss due to error rates of 5% over the next 12 months. Limit the number of customer complaints related to your service to 4 per year. And then it goes on. And then the one was around reducing postage charges by 5%. So if you gave these 4 goals to a team that was engaged and they were relevant and they were part of felt part of the organization, I could easily see some smart and bright, ambitious people figuring out how to hit these targets because they are smart. They are pretty specific. All of them are measurable. They have a target attached to them. They're not crazy, so they're achievable. They're not completely bonkers. Like, it's not reduced postage charges by 75%. It's attainable, right? It's realistic. And of course, they all have a time frame attached to them that makes them time bound. So you can see how 4 of these goals of the 8 would be frustrating to have, and 4 would be potentially possible and engaging in a way. So we talked about this. So individual goals, we're not talking about organizational goals. We're talking about goals and objectives for individuals are not smart when they leave too much room for misinterpretation. So like get people into beds within 24 hours. That was misinterpreted to be, I can do that by taking the wheels off the gurney. That's not achievable, right? It's against what you're trying to achieve. They don't succinctly convey what success or failure means. And they're frustrating and demotivating. So if we go back to the previous slide, how can I be held to account for a decision that the city council is going to make, maybe at some point, possibly anytime in the future? Well, if you're holding my performance to that measure, that is completely, utterly demotivating. But if our goals are smart, if they are highlight what's important to the organization, and this is way above the average employee's pay grade, but an organization really needs to clearly articulate what is important to that organization. So earlier on in this conversation, we talked about the first aid expansion program that we were involved with. But at the beginning of it, it was a silly, high-minded statement about making sure that people, sorry, let me just go back to my notes, had the skills and knowledge to make safe choices, prevent injuries, and respond in an emergency situation. Well, that said nothing about first aid. Is that important? What does that mean to an employee? But as we defined it and clarified it, then we were able to show how each employee could contribute to the organization. So we were able to say, this is how you can meet our goals and be part of it. And we reduced ambiguity. Like that statement, you could, like I said earlier, you could drive a trainload of objectives and mission statements and things through there and probably hit that goal in a way that never helped a single person ever. And then if it was clear, like we had a stretch goal, it was to double our reach in 5 years. Well, how motivating is that to people that we were able to set them up in a way to be successful? Most goals, and we've talked a lot about this, so it's like weaselly words, things that don't mean and achieve. Let me just find back here. Sorry, I'm just going to flip back again to find some language that maybe we could say would be weaselly. So SMART goals, we talked about this earlier, like reducing, weaselly words mean, well, it'd be nice if we got to this place, or it was vague, and the vague ideals, well, obviously that thing around the first aid, that was so vague, it was unbelievable. Milestones, but not results. Well, the milestone in the one was the council approved something by the 15th of August. It was too unfocused. All of those goals that were weaselly words or vague were not focused, certainly not focused on the organization, and nothing that the employee could attend. And they had unintended consequences. So, for example, we look at the hospital situation in the UK, where the unintended consequences were that somebody was, quite frankly, breaking the rules and arguably mistreating patients because they were trying to hit this weird goal that meant something to people way above the person, and people were not getting the services they needed. So these are what we really want to. And I love this little cartoon, because it's like, can you imagine the goal that this employee had was to close IT support tickets, service requests, tickets as fast as possible. And I see it all the time. We probably do it too. Like I have a IT web company, a company that supports me with web services, my email and my website and whatnot. And as soon as I'm done talking to them on the phone, I get a survey saying, how was your experience? Half the time I have no idea, because I don't even know if whatever we talked about has fixed the problem. Now, luckily for me, they're good guys and girls, and they really work hard, and it's all super helpful. But the unintended consequences of this particular cartoon is that the ticket's closed now. Thanks very much, and I met my goals. What we want to do is to be able to clearly articulate our goals. So we talked or many times earlier in different sessions of the inner circle where we talked about the first team model, right? That triangle of people that are your peers, and your boss. And you need to be together on these things. You need to be focused on the work that you want to do. And we write down that goal. So if your bosses higher up in the organization are not giving clear goals, then it behooves you as a management team or a leadership team to write down a goal that will help you meet that bigger objective. And then once you get these things done, then bring your team together, and it can be a kind of a fun exercise, is get them to pull it apart. Find the words that are weaselly and vague and unhelpful and identify them. And then go to your boss and ask them what they meant, or who wrote this goal, and ask them what they meant by that. And then as a team, then replace those words with clear definitions and reword the goal for yourself. Now, most organizations don't really care how you get it done. So if you can make a case to your boss that this is how you're going to approach the problem of goals and objectives, I think that more power to you. And most bosses would say, great, off you go. That suits, because they're too busy. They don't want to be bothered a lot of times with this. So if you can start to articulate a better objective, a better goal for your people that are working with you on how to get things done, then it's super helpful for you. So fostering conversations with people is super helpful. So, if one of the goals is around informing, here's a statement. I don't know how it sounds to you, but improve employee ratings, that you are informing your decision. So this is a Weasley kind of a goal statement, right? So you want to improve employee ratings about decisions that impact work by 10% by a specific date. Well, what does that mean? Nothing, right? If you were a boss or a leader and someone gave this to you as a goal, which someone did, this is an actual goal, it's a completely horrible position to put somebody in. So, but what if you were to take that and change that goal by identifying the Weasley words and the vague words and clearing it out, and restating the goal that every 2 to 4 weeks through in-person meetings or emails, share key safety, training, and informations about challenges within the department with each employee team. It's still not perfect, but it's a lot better, right? And if you were to take this back to your boss and say, this is the goal that I think we should put in place, it achieves your outcome that you're trying to get to, but yet it's articulated. So it's smarter in the literal sense of the actual word smart, and it is smarter in the term smart being specific, measurable, achievable, relatable. Still not perfect, but you're getting there. And most bosses don't care. If one of my employees said, Steve, this is how I can help you meet your goals and objectives, I would say, thank Christ. Come on in my office, sit down, and let's talk about this. And let's work through this in a way that's applicable and practical for you to do your job and make me look good, because all I want to do is not get yelled at the end of the month, right? It's by my boss. One of the things I just want to, as we get close towards the end here, it's going to be a shorter session, I think, today. But one of the things that I believe that we all have to do is have a conversation with our boss and our peers in that magic triangle of the first team, is what are their goals and objectives. So if you understand your boss's goals and objectives and what their performance, but how their performance is being measured by their boss, that person's boss, then all of a sudden they become your goals and objectives, and you become much clearer in what you're trying to achieve. So as we wrap up, I would just invite everyone to think about that conversation. I'll give you a heads up for the next inner circle. It's not the third Thursday in March because I have a speaking engagement that I got to travel to, but it'll be the following week, which is the 28th of March. And we're going to be looking at hiring good employees. And I'm going to bring a guest speaker in from a search firm that I know quite well that will be able to engage. And Denise, I'm just going to wrap up the conversation and turn off the record, and we can open it up for a conversation. So anyways, everybody take care. We'll see you on the 28th of March.